Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 9th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting here in lovely Lower Makefield Township. Just to get started, let's call the roll. Mr. Bush.
Present.
Mr. Costello.
Here.
Mr. Gill.
Here.
Ms. Torbert.
Here.
And Mr. Coyle is here as well, so all 5 members are present. Perfect. Let's move on to the approval of the minutes from the April 29th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I wasn't here, so I'll abstain from. Sorry.
I'm going to ask a question. Have we received the minutes?
Yeah,
from
I didn't
April
see them.
29th?
I have not received them.
I didn't see him.
Yeah, we never got them.
Perfect.
I noticed
So,
that this afternoon, but too late to send it.
so we'll just
You'll table it?
table the matter. I don't think we have to call a vote for the tabling because there's nothing to vote on. All right, so I presume we'll have those in July. Perfect.
I noticed it.
That brings us to item number 3, the Dogwood Drive subdivision.
Okay, so Dogwood Drive off of Delaware Rim, a subdivision was approved roughly 5 years ago. Recently, DOMAC Engineering, on behalf of the developer, reached out to the township, Jim and I, to fill out the component for a municipal planning agency review. We did one of these recently. It's come before the planning commission as well. Excuse me. The developer and the engineer have been working with Aqua the last couple of years to finalize the sewer alignment. And this is just a chance for the planning commission to give any comments and just to confirm that the component 4A sheet we sent you is in line with the ordinances and the master plan. Myself and Jim marked it off. They received variances a while ago. It does seem to be in line with the comprehensive plan and all the relevant planning ordinances. I'm not sure if anyone has any comments about it, but yeah, pretty standard.
Okay, so we are just reviewing the component for a, you mean, the agency, you guys reviewed this, right? And you're just presenting this up here to say, we reviewed it?
Yes.
That is correct. It's required to be signed by the planning agency, which is the Lower Makefield Planning Commission. And either you sign it, or once you guys vote to sign it, we would sign it on your behalf.
Okay. And the review was completed by you, Mr. Majewski, and I'll pull a Dan Grenier here. You reviewed all the things you said you reviewed. It complies where it says it complies.
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. It's a shame he's not here.
Yeah. And as Dan had noted that, they did receive variances for the project. They did receive planning commission approval.
Yep.
Therefore, it is compliant with our ordinances and our Act 537 plan, which envisions sewering as many properties in the township as possible.
Okay. Any questions from the board or commission? Any question from the town's new engineer? Perfect. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it. Okay, so the motion is to approve the review and sign the review letter, which I think would fall to our secretary, right? Any public comment? Nothing online?
Nope.
Perfect. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor of the planning commission signing off on this review, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous, 5 ayes. That takes us to number 4, SALDO ordinance amendment to repeal stormwater sections for consistency with the new stormwater management ordinance. Let's kick us off. Dan?
Yep, I got it. So yeah, about roughly, a year ago, the township engaged HRG to do an overhaul of our stormwater management ordinance, just to make it in line, with recent changes to, changes from the DEP, just to make it more stringent, and just to be a little bit tougher on developers and kind of do everything we can in terms of a statutory requirement to make, stormwater more stringent throughout the township. So the SALDO amendment that we have today on the agenda is just to repeal the stormwater management related sections below that have been superseded by the recently adopted stormwater management ordinance. So essentially, the new stormwater management ordinance that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors encompasses a lot of the things that are currently in the SALDO ordinance related to stormwater. And this will help because it will, allow us to grant less waivers to developers and, it's just kind of doing some things to, reduce some red tape. It'll be 178-93, stormwater management and surface runoff control, 178-94, stormwater detention basin ownership and maintenance fund, and 178-95, erosion and sedimentation controls grading. And like I said, everything in these ordinances that I just mentioned has either been incorporated into the ordinance or essentially no longer relevant.
And procedurally, is there a county planning commission review of these repeals as well?
So we technically, per the MPC, we technically don't need to send this to the planning commission because it doesn't fall under the auspice of the zoning ordinance or the SALDO, correct?
Actually, no, it does.
Sorry.
The stormwater.
Stormwater, I was thinking of the stormwater ordinance.
Technically need to go to the Bucks County Planning Commission. Since this is an amendment to subdivision land development, it does need to go to the county for their concurrence.
Yeah, sorry, I got confused because we didn't have to send the stormwater ordinance to the planning commission. But we will, like Jim said, send the SALDO to them to review.
Okay, so the process here would be that if we vote to repeal these sections because they've been superseded, then that gets reviewed by the county planning commission, who letter they concur, then it appears before the Board of Supervisors for a vote. Correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. We spent a lot of time on stormwater management, so, I'm comfortable if staff is saying that these parts are redundant, but does anyone on the commission have any questions?
I guess the only thing for me is just, I'd just like to understand, like, what type of thing, it didn't go word for word, right? You said you got rid of some things that aren't relevant anymore. Can you just give me an example of that? Just help me understand, like, what kind of thing you would take out like that?
Literally, every stormwater-related item that was in our subdivision land development ordinance was incorporated into our stormwater ordinance. So there were a lot of technical things that weren't in our prior Act 167 planned ordinance. J.J. Robinson from HRG went through, incorporated all those where applicable into our stormwater management ordinance. There were a few things that were just outdated and no longer applicable.
Yeah, I'm just
that were
kind of
deleted.
curious what that is, just for my own edification, really. I'm not.
I think one of the things was they had like a minimum pipe size for certain things, but with newer best management practice techniques,
Right.
sometimes you have smaller pipe sizes. And there were a few other things that just were outdated.
Okay.
This is a lot of the stuff that we end up wavering on every
Okay.
plan, right? Where they're saying, well, the coverage requirements are out of date, and the pipe, today holds better and all that, correct?
Correct. And as Dan stated, that was, you should have a few less waivers, one or two that are standard.
Yeah, that was just for my own understanding, just all.
So
I'm not a stormwater expert, so.
Junie,
I just, is this good?
you're going to want to pull that thing really close to you, or we're going to get the light
Okay,
flash.
can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
No, I just wanted to tack on to what he was saying exactly, is that the stormwater ordinance has a lot of those, the pieces that we're removing were redundant. So you have them in two places. It's definitely better practice to have them in one place, especially if you're going to update something. So the pieces that are totally redundant, it's definitely recommended to have them in one ordinance, because if you're going to update something in the future, you'll forget to do it elsewhere. There's a lot of room for error or misinterpretation by developers. The other piece where there's some, what we're saying, potentially older, dated pipe sizes or design, like minimum requirements for design, it's still based on PennDOT's, so PennDOT's minimum requirement, the state requirement is still being held to. So you're finding that you're getting a lot of waivers based on having some things that are not applicable anymore, and they're always referencing PennDOT generally, which they are meeting state standards. So you're at least having the state standards still that they're going to have to be held to. So I just wanted to say, it's uncommon. It's probably good so that you have it in one place.
Perfect, gotcha. All right, thanks. Like I said, I wasn't questioning anything. I was just trying to understand, make sure I understood it, that's all.
Not a problem.
Any other questions from the commission members? Seems pretty straightforward. Any public comment online? I'm sure we're burning up the YouTube bandwidth tonight with this, this agenda. Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion? To repeal?
I'll move to repeal per what Jim described.
So you could, I guess you could,
Could we be a little bit more,
so, I
with an
mean,
ordinance repeal?
this is just, I'm just spitballing, but you could maybe say a motion to repeal ordinances 178-93, 178-94, and 178-95? Does that sound right, Maureen?
That's good.
Okay.
Yes.
I believe that was Adrian's motion. Do we have a second?
I'll move that, yeah. That's what I meant.
We thought that's what you meant.
I have it written down.
I can second that.
All right, Mr. Gill is seconding. With no public comment, I will call the question. All those in favor of repealing sections 178-93 through 195, indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's 5 ayes. It passes unanimous. Thank you very much. On to number 5, the floodplain ordinance amendment to be consistent with new requirements for FEMA Community Rating System Program. So what's this agenda item, and then what's the request of the commission tonight?
Our floodplain ordinance was adopted or readopted in 2014 to be consistent with the updated floodplain mapping that was done around that time. Since that time, we have become involved in the community rating system, which is a program FEMA has to help lower flood insurance rates for residents through the National Flood Insurance Program if the township takes additional measures and steps to make their floodplain management program more robust and more strict. We have done that, and we are considered a Class 7 community, which allows us a 15% discount on flood insurance rates through the National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay.
As part of that review, we get reviewed every year. This year, when they reviewed us, there have been a few minor changes to what they're looking for in the ordinance. The community rating system is looking for requirements above and beyond those that are required from FEMA. I have then gone through, looked at their comments that came from the Insurance Services Office, which is delegated for the administration of the Community Rating System Program from FEMA, and came up with the draft revisions in front of you. A few of the changes that they did were, one was the definition of a substantial improvement. The ordinance had said that any reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or improvement of a structure that exceeds 50% of the value needs to be brought into compliance with the program. They wanted the words added, any new construction or development. And they also wanted to take away the allowance that if a structure is modified to correct existing violations of local health safety code specifications, that those not be exempted from the substantial improvement requirement. So that's in the definition of substantial improvement.
Jim, just before you move on, who determines what's 50% of the value?
That determination is made by either the market value or by an acceptable appraisal for the town, to the township, of the value of the structure itself. It's not the structure, it's not the value of the whole property, it's the value just of the structure.
Thanks.
Do we know like how many developments that this would affect, I guess, now or in the future?
Well, it would affect any property within the floodplain that is modified. So if you have a house, let's say your house is worth $300,000, the actual, just the structure. If you decided you wanted to rehab your house, knock down walls, add additions, do stuff like that, you could add up to $150,000 in improvements. But once you exceed that 50% of the value of the structure threshold, then you'd be required to bring the entire structure into compliance with the current floodplain management regulations. The purpose of that is so that you don't have people, I sort of say, throwing good money after bad. You know, you have a house that's in the floodplain, you have the chance of having it damaged during a flood. And they understand that people do need to make improvements, things are done to your house that you need to do. However, when you're doing something that's that significant, half the value of the structure, you should spend the extra money to make it more flood resistant. Elevating the home is the most common thing to do there.
Let me ask a question on that. So exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure. If I have a property, let's use $500,000 is the home, right? And I put on a major addition and I change out the roof at the same time and I come up with a bill of $249,000. I'm below 50%. And now, a couple years down the line, I throw on another addition, I redo my siding and whatever else. Do I only have $1,001 left of improvement before this triggered? Or am I now under the new assessment of the improvements a year later?
These numbers are cumulative. So you can't do a 249,000 and a 249,000 and a 249,000.
Where does it say that they're cumulative in the text? It just refers to 50% of the market value of the structure at the start of construction.
Catch.
That's a great question.
I mean, it's not a likely scenario, but inflation being what it is.
Unlikely, though.
It's not unlikely at all.
Let me just check to see if that is in there.
If I have a small home on a lot of acreage somewhere, and I could conceivably do a series of improvements to get around having to comply.
Actually, I thought that was in there already, so that's something that we'll need to amend to include that wording.
So, and then I'll turn over for more questions, but timing-wise, so this just appeared on our agenda today. Is there a urgency to getting through this and getting this approved as is? Is there something else, another timeline pending?
I think we have a meeting with the community rating system representatives in August. So it's something that we'd like to have done in the next month.
Okay.
And I guess this is consistent with our neighboring townships too? Same type of ordinances, I guess, that they would have?
Yeah, they're pretty much all fairly similar. Some have extra restrictions, some have, actually, it's all based on a model ordinance that has been updated periodically. And, we'll be checking through just to see if there's any other little things in the most current ordinance, just to make sure that we capture it all.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, is this 50% requirement, what is that based on? Is it, why isn't it 40% or 60% or 25%?
No idea. They just came up with a number that they thought was reasonable. They probably said, if, it's okay to improve your house, that happens. You need to make repairs, you need to do stuff, maybe you want to put on a little extra living space. But when you're doing half the value of your structure, you should spend the extra money to make sure that there's not flood damages.
I don't know, I would just think for myself, if you're already in a floodplain and you only want to put, say you have $1 million house, but you only want to put, say you want to put a new, I don't know what it would be, a mother-in-law's suite or whatever, and that only was, a couple $100,000, wouldn't you want there to be an incentive, because you are in a floodplain, for that to be as flood-proof as possible?
Well, there are other provisions within this ordinance that stuff like all of your utilities, those should be elevated. There's stuff in there that should be made the most in compliance as possible. I forget what the exact wording is, but
I
it
think it was
is
like
in
2
here.
feet over, or something, 2 feet above, I think, when I read earlier.
Right, I
Yeah,
saw
so if
that.
you, let's say you were adding an addition onto your house, we always tell people, well, now's the time to get your hot water heater out of the basement. It's time to get your washer and dryer out of the basement. Put that into your addition or somewhere into the upper level. Move your electrical panel. So those are all things that they are in here somewhere as a requirement.
To that point, moving the hot water heater out of the basement of my house would be very, very expensive because half of my house is on slab and half's on basement. So you'd have to replumb the whole damn thing to do that, which I think is why you have the 50% requirement here. It's a balance between the risk pool of the insurance and reasonable costs. None of these changed requirements would lead to a resident who has flood insurance today losing flood insurance. Is that correct?
Correct. A few other minor revisions. The ordinance had referenced the 2009 International Building Code and International Residential Code. The state is adopting, or it'll become effective in the middle of July, the 2021 International Building Code, International Residential Code. So we've revised those references within here to be consistent with that. I think the 2023 model code used the 2018 code or as amended. We just went to the 2021 because that will be in effect by the time that this ordinance would be in effect. One other change that they had highlighted when they did the review of our ordinance was that one section of the ordinance could have been misconstrued to say that we're allowing development below the floodplain. There was the one section, it's 200-54D2H, I think it is, where it said that electrical, heating, ventilation, plumbing, air conditioning equipment, and other surface facilities have been designed and located to prevent water entry or accumulation. We've amended that to say that those systems should be designed to be 2 feet above the base flood elevation, which is our regulatory flood elevation, and that it meet the requirements of ASC 24 and other code provisions of the electrical code. And there is a slight little adjustment there that, you can't have everything compliant. I know,
So,
like,
Jim,
for
that's-
instance, PICO,
Yeah.
they have a requirement for a meter to be at a certain level, and so you can't meet the elevation requirement and still have your meter at that location, but there's ways to make it compliant.
So in this document, that's no longer D2H, that is now D3. It has been inserted at the start of 3?
No, the H should still be in there.
On the-
The H is crossed out, but it's still there.
Crossed out erroneously.
That's right.
All right, the track changes I'm seeing, yeah, the H is removed.
The H is,
But it
That
should
was
still
just
be
a
there.
typo.
It's a
It should still be there.
Okay.
The H should still be there.
typo.
It's a typo, right.
No, I understand it's a typo. I'm just saying, before, the version I'm looking at shows it as 3 and not H. So just make sure on the final version it says what it's supposed to say.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
Now, is this, because unless I misunderstand the whole process, someone could conceivably opt to buy a property and not get it insured in the floodplain. Is that correct? If they buy in cash, they.
If they buy in cash.
If they buy in
If they're not
cash.
getting a loan, they could do that. Will this change still apply to them?
Yes.
Yes.
So regardless of whether you actually have insurance, you still need to comply with the floodplain management ordinances in the town?
That is correct. That is a requirement of the National Flood Insurance Program.
So I guess, and that protects the insurance program from the next person who wants to buy the house and needs insurance.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, separate and apart.
All right, got it. No, I just wanted to make.
That was a
sure.
good question, because that is something that someone might think they're getting up on people,
Yep.
but they're not really.
Yep.
So even if they, sorry, just to be clear, so even if they don't have insurance, but they improve 50.00001% of the value, they have to comply with this ordinance.
Correct.
Great.
Correct.
It is an ordinance, yes.
Right.
So they will have to comply.
And I guess here's one other question. In these kinds of processes, if somebody's trying to do this, like zoning hearing board or if, somebody's developing something here, there's no, like, this is not the kind of thing, if we want to stay in this program, we can put a waiver on, right? This is a has to do, right?
Well, there is a variance appeal process that is allowed, and just like with almost any rule and regulation. And in order to get that variance, they need to make a very strong case of why they feel it's necessary to deviate from the standards.
Okay.
Sorry, and that appeal process is with the township or it's with FEMA?
It is with the Township Zoning Hearing Board.
It's toward the latter part of the
Yeah.
document in front
Okay.
of you, yes.
Just, you had said at the very beginning, Jim, that this was under the Community Rating System Program, Lower Makefield was a Class 7, or with these regulations? I think that's what you said.
Well, we're a Class 7 community. I didn't hear the last part.
That with the, under the Community Rating System Program?
Yes.
Okay, so, and that entitled people to a 15% discount for flood insurance if they.
Correct.
Okay. Are there other classes that would give more or less of a discount? And what do those regulations look like, if they do exist?
Just complying with the FEMA regulations for the floodplain ordinance would allow you to be a Class 9 community, which I believe is just a 5% discount.
Okay.
In order for us to meet the requirement for a Class 8 rating, we need to have some of these revisions adopted. We're Class 7, so obviously if we can't meet the Class 8 requirements, we can't get the Class 7 discount.
Are there any discounts greater than a Class 7 discount?
Yes.
And how high can those discounts go and what's involved?
Oh, I think they can go like all the way up to about,
45,
40, okay.
45% for a class 1.
right.
Is it
The
just-
only community, I think the highest rated community in the state of Pennsylvania, I think it might be a Class 6 community. I know we've been sort of edging towards that for a while, but every time we get closer, then they change some of the rules and the scoring system. And we get closer, and then we do more, get closer, and then they change the rules, then we get further away again.
Okay, so what would be the discount at Class 6, and what's the current distinction between 6 and 7?
Well, there's a whole series of things that are done, activities, flood data maintenance, flood map, communication with the public. You know, you may have seen stuff in our newsletter and on Facebook and on our website that try to communicate all this stuff to the public. We do mailings to people. There's so many things ways to gather points. To get the higher rating is very labor intensive. So we've been trying to do more to hopefully get up to the next level of discount, which I think the next level is a 20% discount. But like I said, every time we seem to get closer, they change it so that we're at that 15% discount.
It sounds, just from hearing what you've said, that most of what would have to be done now would be full on the township, not on the residents. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, the program is administered by the township. We're the ones who drive how we think we can better comply with floodplain management. There's certain things that we just don't do, we don't have the manpower to do. Therefore, we're not going to try to get credit for something that it just doesn't make sense. But we've tried to get credit for as many things as possible, and we're always striving to get more. And hopefully, by the time we have our visit with the Insurance Services Office in August, we may have another few things that we feel we're able to take on, that maybe get us closer to that higher discount.
And I think I heard someone ask this before, but I didn't hear the answer. Ballpark, how many houses or residences in Lower Makefield are in a floodplain?
I used to have that number memorized. I don't recall right now.
Okay. Is it 10, 20%, or?
No, it's not that high.
Can I jump on that for a second, Tony?
Sure.
So would FEMA let us know what our residents are paying in flood insurance premiums annually?
I know they have statistics on a community-wide basis of how many properties are insured, how much the total insurance costs are. That's public information. They don't give out individual information on individual.
No, not an
properties.
individual home, but yeah, it's going to take more manpower and more time, person power and time to investigate getting up to another 5%. But until we know how much money that's going to save the township's residents, we don't know whether it's worth the effort or not. It could be a substantial amount of money.
Right.
I just want to add, that's a pretty lengthy study that can be done. It takes a long time. We did it for Lewisburg Borough, and they're it took a year. So it's not an easy thing. You have to survey, you have to send out surveys to each of the property owners, the residential properties, the businesses, especially businesses, because they are impacted the most and also have to contribute the most, so then you do a cost and benefit analysis, and you kind of identify at what that point is where it makes sense to do that. But it is doable, and it's doable. It's a
The
feasible.
National Flood Insurance Program is a federally run program, right? There's not a private insurer in the center. The premiums are paid to the federal government. Federal government provides it. Has anyone ever tried just doing a FOIA request to the NFIP to ask what the total premiums paid in a calendar year were? Is that data that we could get through a FOIA request?
Oh, I think that data is readily available. Not easily accessible, but
Sure.
it is available.
Yeah.
Oh, and also, we have approximately 350 buildings in the floodplain.
Okay.
So you figure if 350 structures, maybe paying an average of a couple of $1,000s a year. If you got an extra 10% discount, that's $200. $200? Wait, I can't do the math, sorry. Times the 350. So it's, and there are more properties that we always try to encourage people to get flood insurance whenever possible. Some people think they don't need it, and it's just, when they get hit with the flood, they want help, but FEMA is limited on the assistance that they can give if you do not have flood insurance.
Okay.
So if anyone is listening and they're interested in getting flood insurance, we do have brochures here in the lobby of the township building, and you're always welcome to give me a call, and I can try to help assist you with that information.
Okay, but we're probably not talking millions of dollars that township residents are paying.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. If we trust ChatGPT, and we probably shouldn't, it says the Pennsylvania state average is $1,038 per year. So, okay. And yes, you're right, there's only one community in Pennsylvania that is a Class 6. So big props to the city of Wilkes-Barre.
That's where I grew up.
Yeah. Okay.
Another minor change was to raise the freeboard, or the sort of safety factor between what the base flood elevation is predicted to be and where the first floor of the house is, and/or all of your equipment that could be damaged in a flood. And we recommend raising that from 1.5 feet to 2 feet. Part of that is it's just better for the community in that, you have oftentimes floods that are greater than what they used to call the 100-year flood. And so this is an extra protective factor. Also, that gives just a little bit of leeway in that 1.5 foot that you want to maintain, if someone messes up when they build the house by a couple of inches, if they're at 1.4 feet, they have a higher insurance rate than if you're at 1.6 feet.
Right.
Because FEMA actually rounds up at 1.5. So this basically is an extra safety factor for the homeowners to sort of protect themselves. I don't know if that made sense or not, but,
Yep.
okay.
Is that something that the developers would be aware of when they build the houses?
Yeah, if a house is built in the floodplain, to add an extra 1/2 foot really isn't a problem. Like I said, the problem is you might have someone say, I want to make it exactly 1.5 feet above, and then they mess up by an inch. Then when the homeowner goes to get flood insurance, they pay maybe several $100 more per year because they're now at 1.4 feet, which rounds down to the 1 foot discount as opposed to 1.5 and above rounds to the next highest number.
And those numbers apply, that's the change in the table, right? So if it's the year 2042 and the floodplain elevation has changed, that's not going to put that homeowner out who was in compliance in 2025, right?
Oh, they rate the homes based on a new system that kind of takes into account how far away you are from a water body and where you are elevation-wise compared to the water body. So it's not as critical as it used to be. But if they restudy a river or stream and come up with different numbers, then that could change things. So that's another reason for 2 feet's not a bad idea. If somehow they dropped the flood, or sorry, elevated the flood
Right.
by 4 inches, with the 2 feet, you'd still be complying with the 1.5 feet.
Okay.
And those are the changes. The other recommendation we have, right now, the ordinance is currently located within our zoning ordinance. Most townships and boroughs have put it separately as a standalone ordinance. It doesn't make a lot of difference administratively, except for the fact that when you want to make changes, it's a lot easier to change the standalone floodplain ordinance. Builders, residents, contractors, they often look for, where is the floodplain ordinance? I get that question fairly often, that people are wondering, where's our floodplain ordinance? And I have to point to the specific sections within the zoning ordinance because they're used to seeing it just as its own standalone ordinance. And my recommendation would be to change this to a standalone ordinance and then consequently repeal those sections of the zoning ordinance that would no longer be applicable.
And Maureen, are you concurrent with that opinion?
I am. I think it makes sense for all the reasons Jim said. It's easier to locate, easier to direct people to, and if changes are to be made, you reduce the risk of making mistakes because you're only changing it in one place.
It does adjust I don't know if it's the right term, the force of the body that makes a waiver decision though, right? Because the planning commission is just an advisory commission. So if someone were to ask a waiver for here, we could go, yeah, no, it doesn't really matter. The board of supervisors could do whatever they want. Zoning, however, is quasi-judicial. So you would lose the force of zoning's authority to grant or deny a waiver.
Well, the zoning hearing board doesn't do waivers. That's planning
Variance,
commission board.
sorry.
They do variances. This ordinance still has it going to the zoning hearing board if anyone wants to appeal from the provisions that are contained within. And I did check because the question came up, what would that impact the ability of the zoning hearing board to have jurisdiction? However, I looked at the ordinance and it clearly states in there that the zoning hearing board is the deciding body on appeals. And I looked at 5 ordinances from other areas throughout the state, and they all have the same methodology. It's a standalone ordinance, and they all have appeals going to the zoning hearing board.
Okay, so it maintains that authority of zoning while also making it more flexible for the township to make adjustments.
Correct.
Yep. We also don't get too many variance requests related to floodplain stuff. I think there's one in July, and that's the first one we've had so far this year, I think. So it's not like we're inundated with, variances for floodplain stuff. We try to, work with them and stuff.
Will there be any reference in the zoning part of the code to direct people to the new standalone ordinance, floodplain ordinance? I'm just saying people that are used to looking, I know you said most people, it's the other way around. They're wondering why you don't have a separate, well, a certain number of people are used to seeing it in zoning. Is there value in having some kind of notation there that this is where it is now, and is that in there already, or?
Under 200-51B, natural resource protection, we do have two things that reference the floodplains, and those would just have to be updated to point to the new chapter of the ordinance. Currently, it says the provisions of chapter 200-54 of the code. Here would point to whatever the ultimate numeration they use in the township code for that. It would say chapter 143 of the township code. And then we also talk about the resource protection, and that would also say it's not permitted except as provided in chapter whatever the code chapter is designated by our code compiler.
And when you're looking at the code, where would the new ordinance be located? Would it be around where SALDO and zoning are, or would it be at the very end because it's newer, or where? Somebody just looking at the code, where would they find, how would they
There's
find it? Or just
a section specifically for new laws when you go to E-code. I think it's right at the top, so it'll say new laws, and it'll have a hyperlink, and then you could click on it, and you can kind of see all the ordinances that have been adopted by the BOS within the past year or so.
Right.
Yeah, I think what Jenny's referring to, like, if you go to our township code online, it basically has like, let's see the numbers here. We have like chapter 70 are alarms, and chapter 109 are firearms, chapter 164 is sanitary sewer, SALDO's 178. Where would that be? From what I've seen, I think they try to make it kind of in alphabetical order.
Okay.
So, we have a requirement, chapter 113 is fireworks, and then we have chapter 116 is grading and excavating. I believe they would try to do that alphabetically and put that in between either 114 or 115. That's just a guess, but that's
Would probably.
kind of how they try to do it, and except for when they can't.
Right. I mean, it's nice to have the new law section, but it might not occur to people that, the township's floodplain ordinance is a new law. That's where I find it at the end in the list of new laws. Like, it would be better if it's,
Yeah, and some people aren't
Nearby.
even aware that we have a floodplain ordinance, and they'll submit permits. Our permitting system automatically flags any property that even touches the floodplain, and then we look at it to evaluate, is the work proposed within the floodplain, or is it just touching a small corner of the lot that it's not impacted? And so we flag that every time for further review, and if the work isn't a floodplain, then the ordinance is applicable. If the floodplain touches the property, but the work is not within the floodplain, then it would not be applicable.
So Jimmy, are you saying that they renumber, like if they were to pull this out and make a floodplain ordinance and it would be 115, everything would get knocked down one?
Yeah,
No.
there are sections that are reserved in our ordinance, so we can insert them in there.
Okay, 168 reserved.
Yes.
Yeah, we have 113 and we have 116, but we don't have a 114 or a 115.
Got it, okay. This is a small nitpick, so there are references to the floodplain administrator here, but the floodplain administrator isn't actually defined until later in the ordinance. I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a person who gets annoyed when that happens. Do we think that we should put floodplain administrator in the definitions part of the document?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not also a big fan of definitions within definitions, so I like everything up front.
Yeah.
So I noticed that as well. I had that sort of flagged.
Okay. And the floodplain administrator is designated as the zoning officer. Who is the zoning officer?
That would be me.
Cool. I thought so.
And we also have in there language that, reviews would be by me and/or someone that we designate, like sometimes, and the one that's coming up to the zoning hearing board, we're actually going to have our township engineer review some of the technical aspects of what they're proposing. So I'll be doing the review, and they'll be doing the more technical
Right.
nuts and bolts of what they're proposing, part of the review.
And so the zoning officer, yada, 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 delegate duties and responsibilities set forth in these regulations to qualified technical personnel, et cetera. So qualified technical personnel can mean contractors and third parties. It's not limited to just employees of the township, correct, Maureen?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect, thank you. The only other thing that I have any concern about is just that initial question of whether the value is cumulative or not. I don't know if I want to actually make a recommendation that we put language in to make it cumulative, because I don't know how you actually make that work over time.
Well, we do have all of that stuff tracked.
I think there would have to be timeframes.
Well, yeah, but what's the starting-
associated with it? Yeah.
Yeah, what's the starting
Would be
time?
like after every 5 years it starts over, or
Yeah,
something
Well, the,
similar to that?
The
Because-
starting date is to when they were first put into the floodplain. For some of the properties, that would be the initial 1977 mapping.
You could replace the carpet on some of these homes and be over 50% at today's prices.
Well, carpeting is not,
I'm just
not a
saying,
building.
if that's where we're going on the valuation, that's
Your roof.
aggressive.
well, one thing in the homeowner's favor, as the price of homes go up, their substantial improvement threshold goes up. We just had one a year or two ago. They were getting somewhat close to that 50% threshold. And a year later, they came back with another permit that as soon as I saw it, it's like, oh, they may be over it. But I looked at the new market value of the structure, and it went up commensurate with that, that they still maintain that delta between where they
Yeah, but
are
do you
and what
Wait a
the
minute,
price-
when
Yeah.
you looked at it the latter time, you looked at the increased value of the house, not putting aside market conditions, the improvements from the first earlier improvements raised the value of the home. So the 50% number
Doesn't make any sense.
doesn't make any sense anymore, right?
I mean, I guess in my
So-
opinion,
so-
if you're
oh,
going to do
sorry.
this, you got to put time limit on it.
Hang on, Dan looks like he's going to say something smart.
So if you're, if you refer to number 39 under
So
definitions,
this is 39, so actually, it's not from the new, this is 39 from the National Flood Insurance Program recommendations.
what, July 2023 it's dated, I think?
Yeah, so this is a source, a source document.
So it says, the rolling period of accumulation of improvements for a building or structure ends when the permit for the first improvement is finalized or closed.
Hey, hang on. Thanks. Sorry, can you read that again?
Sure, sorry. So the rolling period of accumulation of improvements for a building or structure ends when the permit for the first improvement is finalized or closed, which would be after the permit received an inspection. That's technically when the permit would be closed out, so.
So that's it. Open and close book. If I get a permit on Tuesday and I somehow dump 300,000 improvements into my property by Friday, inspector comes, says you're done, book is closed on the boom.
So I don't know if that's the best practice, but that's, so that there's several sources we can refer to when you have us, and we can, when Jim and us, if you want us to help re-review it, but this is the National Flood Insurance Program's just recommendations.
Sure.
There's other language that you can use. There's others that probably are more stringent. We can look at other definitions if you want and talk, and try to button that up if that's what you prefer. But I just, I gave it to Dad because I was like, do I do this? Like, I don't know.
You do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But there's various sources, and so that would be one. And like Jim said, there's like, this class 6, we can probably take a look at what they have in theirs, and if they're going to be a re-review. But
I don't want to overburden homeowners here. I don't want to get any more stringent than the program requires to earn the discount. And I think the rolling period be limited to when the first permit is open through when it's closed makes a lot of sense. People don't get to go around it by saying, I'm going to just do an addition, and now I'm going to do the roof, and now I'm going to do it. So, but let's not go further than the flood insurance program requires us to. It just puts undue burden on residents.
Yeah, actually, I'm not even concerned about the residents. I'm concerned about the township's ability to really effectively manage that. I mean, somebody comes in 4 years later and they're like, what's the calculus for what number am I comparing it to and how much of the old number gets applied to the new number? Like, it's really not.
And the farm sink I put in is no longer in
Yeah,
fashion,
it's
so it
not
didn't
practical.
increase the value,
Yeah.
it lowered it.
It's
We
not
do-
practical. You gotta put some.
Believe it or
sort
not,
of-
we do track all of that information.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, it's just like, okay, so you put, let's see, you have a $100,000 house, you put $49,000 into it. Now, like, before COVID, now after COVID, your house is worth $200,000, but, so that 49.9% is not 49.9%, like how, so you're gonna take that original 49% from 10 years ago and apply it to the new value of the house at 200,000? I'm like, at what point are you how do you keep track of the numerators and the denominators and what's in what? And at what point does it become ridiculous to try and do that?
Well, this is done throughout the country,
Okay.
so it's,
All right, and like I said, I'm not giving you a hard time, I'm just thinking about like the practicality of doing it, that's all.
oh, it can be a real pain in the butt.
Yeah,
Especially if they keep like doing incremental minor improvements. So it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
okay, you got $1,000, then you got $10,000, then you have $1,000, then $1,500, then $10,000. It's like, can you stop improving
Yeah.
your home already?
So
I'm fine with it being there, as long as you guys are fine with it being there.
Yeah, the one thing we do want to do, though, is to make sure we pin this down so
Yep.
that it is, we don't want to punish residents,
Yep.
but at the same time, we're in a way protecting residents.
Yeah.
You don't want to put $200,000 into a home, then have it damaged by floods.
Sure.
And I'm looking, this township right now, the way I look at this whole discussion, this township is putting in an effort to try and save the 350 or so houses that are in the floodplain.
Right.
That have to get this insurance, we're trying to get them the best discount that we can get them. There's some responsibility on the homeowners in order to get that discount. And you gotta do it, it's a group buy, it's not an opt-in or opt-out kind of thing. And I personally don't have a problem going back and saying, this is what we're trying to do, and this is the requirement to doing it.
Without a time-sensitive, you want this done by July? So, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's only a few small pieces of ambiguity. I don't think we have to make a motion on this tonight.
Correct.
I think the only thing that I would ask for is just it's really a clarification on that typo that we have. And then for you to come back with what works for you as far as a definition of a time frame for that 50% value. I'm comfortable with that.
Do you want us to use that wordage from the NFIP?
I'm comfortable with that, but if you think that ties your hands in some way, we could get a little bit more broad. I mean, whatever's going to work for you as a department, right? You might decide, you know what, a 24-month period is most reasonable for us,
Yeah, I don't.
or the permit
I
closing,
don't-
whichever.
I don't think it would be hard for us, and I don't want to speak for Jim, but I think if a permit comes in, we do have a statutory requirement to review it, so it's like, either way, we're going to have to review the permit. So I think that would make sense to tie it to when the permit's closed out, right?
Well, I want to check to see what gets us the most points
Right,
towards
okay.
a better
Right.
discount,
Okay.
without unduly
Yep.
burdening a home.
That's why he's the floodplain administrator, baby.
It's a combination. It's sort of like building permits in general. Some people complain about it.
Yep.
But then again, we are protecting people, and we want
Yep,
to
Exactly. There's a
balance
spirit
the
and a-
protection
and intent.
versus
There's
the.
a spirit and the
Yep.
letter here, right? You want to make sure you got the letter of the law, and we're doing what we need to get the discount. But there is a legitimate spirit behind this whole process to try and make sure that everyone, all the residents and places we have in the floodplain are more robust and are more sustainable within the floodplain.
So if there's no other pertinent questions right now, I think that it's probably a great time to entertain a motion to table this until July so that the floodplain administrator can come back with some clarifications on a couple of points. Does anyone want to make that motion?
I
I'll
can
make that motion.
Second.
All right, I think that's TJ made the motion with Ginny seconding. Any further comment from the commission members? Any public comment online? That's a no. It's shocking. All right, I will call the question, table the motion till next meeting, even though I don't even know if we have to call them. But anyways, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everyone, for the time that went into this, and I'm sure that we'll get through it quickly next month. Okay, I have nothing else on the agenda for this month. Anybody else have anything else they want to share with the group?
Yeah, sorry about forgetting to send the meeting minutes, but we'll send that along with the next agenda. I think not having a meeting last month threw me off, so.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, July 4th, I'm just thinking of July when the meeting will be. Will it be in the
Second
regular?
Tuesday, whatever the.
It's the 14th, is that right?
July 14th.
Yeah, July 14th.
Oh, July 14th?
Yeah, it's typically the second Monday, which, yeah, 14th.
I will not be present on Bastille Day. Thank you, Mr. Erglovich, my middle school English teacher, for drilling that date into my head. Anyways, I won't be present, but will there be a quorum otherwise?
I'll be back.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
July 14th,
Okay.
actually.
Yep, so that's great. So scheduled for July 14th. Perfect. Okay,
Unless you want to be here, we can, July 15th?
I don't think I need to be, but yeah, I'll be gone for the whole week. All right, listen, thank you very much, everyone. With that, we are adjourned. I'm going to gavel because I haven't gotten a gavel in a while.